So when the previous video lecture ended, we had just gotten done talking about Korea. MacArthur disobeys Truman, goes into North Korea. This then gets China involved in the war. The war drags out for another year and a half. It ends up costing MacArthur his job because he disobeyed the one person that he shouldn't have. Um, he's fired basically for insubordination. Insubordination, which just simply means he was told not to do something and he did it anyway, and that was from someone who, in this case, was his boss. So now we're going to look at what was going on here in the United States in the early 1950s. After World War I, we had a Red Scare. You had A. Mitchell Palmer, who was the Attorney General. You had a bomb went off at his place, blew his maid's hands off. You had other mail bombs that were going off around the country. Um, the federal government, what eventually became known as the FBI, started to conduct raids on places that they thought had ties to communism. And, civil rights were just being trampled on left and right. But when the country gets thrown into a hysteria like it was back then, that's what happens. Well, here we are, 1950s, and guess what? You have the same thing taking place. But this time it actually gets a start in the 1940s and then carries on in the 1950s. What I really want to focus on are Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. Um, Ethel Rosenberg is moves to New York City. She's trying to make a go of it as an actress. She takes a job as a secretary, for a an organization that they base themselves on communism. And so while she's working this job, she meets Julius Rosenberg. The two of them fall in love and they get married. Julius really wants to make his mark within this communist organization. And so he feels what better way to do that than to try to help the Soviet Union gain secrets about the nuclear capability that the United States has. It just so happens that Ethel Rosenberg's brother, David Greenglass, is a scientist at Los Alamos with the Manhattan Project. Julius Rosenberg is able to convince David Greenglass to give him documents. Well, lo and behold, next thing you know, the Soviets are testing their first nuclear bomb, and this happens in 1949. And the United States knows that they had to have help because they were not that close to developing a bomb when World War II ended. And so our government starts to investigate it, and the paper trail leads right to the Rosenbergs. And so what the government does, the FBI does, is they basically set up a sting operation, and Julius Rosenberg thinks that he's turning over secret documents to a Russian spy. Turns out to be an undercover FBI agent, and Julius Rosenberg is arrested for it. The feds cannot get Julius to confess to his wrongdoing. So they go ahead and arrest Ethel Rosenberg as well. And they tell Julius, if you just give us what we want, which is a confession, Ethel walks. Julius won't do it. And they said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press charges against Ethel. And Julius just stays steadfast. He doesn't say a word. At the same time, Ethel doesn't say anything to try to save herself. And the other thing is, her brother, David Greenglass, his name is never really brought up in any of this. The feds say, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to see this through. And the Rosenbergs don't blink an eye. And the feds say, okay, we're going to go ahead and press charges. And they press charges, and so then they're officially arrested. Well, we're going to have a trial, and Okay, so now they have to have a trial, and okay, you're both found guilty and you're both going to be given the death penalty. And the feds are thinking that these two, one of them is going to break. Either Julius is going to say, my wife had nothing to do with it, spare her life, which would have been the gentlemanly thing to do, or Ethel is going to say, hey, I didn't have anything to do with this, and I'm sorry, I love my husband, but I'm not going to be executed for this. That probably is maybe a little more of a stretch than, in today's society, I'm guessing a lot of women would have just stepped up and said, I had nothing to do with it. But whether it's back then or today, being a man, Julius Rosenberg should have stepped up and said, nope, my wife had nothing to do with it. And she's innocent. I'm the one you want. And he didn't. They both end up being found guilty of espionage, and they are sentenced to death via the electric chair. They are sent to Sing Sing prison in New York, and then that is where they are eventually executed. So that is the Rosenbergs. Next, we have Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy is a senator, and it's almost like Joseph McCarthy he'd been seeing what had been going on. Alger Hiss had got caught, lying to the government about maybe some covert operations and some spying that was going on, and Alger Hiss was tried, and obviously Alger Hiss got a ton of publicity. The Rosenbergs get a ton of publicity, and it's almost like Joseph McCarthy is starved for attention. So he's giving what on the surface appeared to be an innocent talk to a women's group in Maryland. And during the talk, McCarthy says, I have a list of names of communists that are working in the State Department. Now, you have to realize the State Department is an executive branch department whose job it is to maintain relations with foreign countries. So these are people that are going to be able to get in and out of foreign countries really with no questions asked. And to think that we have communists that are working there, well, this throws the country into a tizzy. And it's almost like McCarthy can't believe how much attention he's being given. And every time McCarthy, the topic is brought up, McCarthy just continues to add to the story. And it's almost like the guy just gets caught up in his own web. Eventually, what happens is that McCarthy, he starts saying that you have all these people in government that are communists, and then you have people in Hollywood that are making movies, and in the process of making the movies, there's messages in there that are messages for communists and things like that. And he's asked to produce a list, and he just produces a list, and it's a list of some of the biggest names in Hollywood at the time. And these individuals end up getting what's called blackballed, which just means that your name goes on a list, and if your name's on that list, no one is going to hire you for anything, not even to make some silly commercial. Nonetheless, McCarthy then starts to say that there are people in the military that are communists. So we end up having what are called the Army McCarthy hearings. And so this is taking place in front of the Senate. And the Senate is calling U.S. servicemen to the stand. And McCarthy is questioning them. And these are young men that have no ties to communism whatsoever. And McCarthy's not getting the answers. During his questioning, he's not getting the answers that he wants. In fact, the answers that he is getting are making him look bad. And McCarthy starts to become unhinged. He gets more and more upset to the point where he's just yelling and really screaming and badgering these witnesses. And when it's all said and done, McCarthy is proven to be a fraud. It comes out that McCarthy's made probably 90-95% of what he was saying, he's made it up. And so, as a member of Congress, he's falsified information. He's falsified information under oath. So there's two forms of punishment that a member of Congress can receive when they've done something wrong. One is expulsion. That's the most severe. That means you're kicked out of Congress. You would think that something as severe as this might require expulsion given the circumstances. But nope, good old Congress, they're going to say, no, we don't think he should be expelled or kicked out of Congress. What we're going to do is he's going to get what is called censure. Censure just simply means the member of Congress that has done something wrong has to stand in front of Congress as the charges against him or her are read. Then the other members of Congress just stand up and they just simply say how disappointed they are at this person for doing what they've done. It's no more than a slap on the wrist. And that's what happens to McCarthy. The man's still able to go ahead and continue to be a member of the U.S. Congress. Then I'm going to move down to Eisenhower in the White House. Eisenhower, and he gets elected in 1952. We'll actually talk more about that election in the next chapter. But Eisenhower originally was in 1948. Truman can run for re-election if he wants to. The Democrats don't even ask Truman, hey, do you want to run for re-election? They actually go and get Eisenhower. And Eisenhower says, no, I don't want to be. I don't want to run for president. And so then the Democrats go, oh, okay, Harry, we'll go ahead and ask, have you see if you want to be. Well, the problem is that Truman believes in civil rights. They're just starting. The wheels are just starting to turn in the civil rights movement in the late 40s. And, of course, Southern Democrats, they don't want this at all. And so they go, and there's a group called the Dixiecrats. Anyway, Truman ends up winning the 48 election, and we'll talk more about that at the beginning of the next chapter. But he wins that. Well, then, of course, in 1950, Korea happens. Eisenhower does not like how Truman has handled Korea. He doesn't like that Truman fired one of his good buddies, Douglas MacArthur. So in 1952, Eisenhower decides, I'm gonna switch sides because Truman, it's his just handling of Korea didn't sit well, and it gave the Democrats a black eye. And well, Eisenhower's like, well, the Republicans are going to win. I maybe could win as a Democrat. They did ask me in 48 to run, but I know if I run as a Republican, I'm going to win. So Eisenhower runs in 1952 and wins that election. So now Eisenhower, he looks at what Truman was doing, and he says, you know what? What Truman was doing was too costly. And so Truman says, it's too costly. He says, what I want to see done is that it's either all or nothing. And no more little wars. We're going to do massive retaliation. We've already dropped 2 atomic bombs on a country, on a foreign people. We will do it again if need be. And so this is what Eisenhower wants to do. This is what's called brinkmanship. Brinkmanship is when you go to the brink of nuclear war. Truman is going to threaten. He's going to threaten nuclear war. He's going to do this 2 times. He's going to do it in Korea because Eisenhower is the president when the Korean War ends. And then he also does this in Taiwan. Remember, after Chiang Kai-shek was ousted from China, he goes to Taiwan, and the United States continues to recognize Chiang Kai-shek as China's leader. This upsets Mao Zedong and the communists, so they threaten to invade Taiwan. And Eisenhower says, if you invade him, we'll nuke you. Okay, this is the end of Chapter 21, Section 3 and 4 lecture video.